Hi guys, welcome to Heavy Metal Tones this week with your podcast host Tony Evans and special guest Benjy Murphy. Hopefully you listened into part one of this two-part special based around the album The Great War by Sabaton or Sabaton, whichever you like to pronounce it. We couldn't get it all into one episode, as I told you last week, so we're squeezing it into tightly and sexily into two parts. Take that as you will. I have my tea. He has his sexy. And so I hope you've listened to the album as I told you to do. It is part of your homework, and we will be marked on it. So the note I said at the end of the first episode, I said, remind me about the hand grenade story.
Story about hand grenades.
Right, so very good friend of mine, and he hopefully does listen to my show every now and again. He dips in and dips out. Is Robert Mills. Now that might give you a little hint of what I'm about to say, but I've worked with Robert Mills for 11 years. He's a music nut like me. He's from the UK like me, living here in Australia. His great grandfather was the inventor of the Mills bomb. Now, the Mills bomb is, as Benjy will know, is the progenitor of the hand grenade, or the forerunner of the hand grenade. It was still a hand grenade, but when you pulled the pin out and threw it, it didn't go off. It went on impact, I believe, the Mills bomb. Whereas the hand grenade, or the modern hand grenade, it's got a timing pin on it. And so you let go of the pin, hold, let go, and chuck, and you've got 3 seconds, 6 seconds, whatever you have. So, Mills bombs. And I said to him, I said, I think Millsy, I think your grandfather was one of the biggest killers in history. And he probably is.
It might have been history's greatest monster.
I think
No.
Millsy, he's not. No.
He's a lovely
I'm sure he was a very lovely man. But Millsy's father was stonemasonry, so I don't think they were murderers. They just made nice temples. And they built his father helped build some of the modern buildings in Sydney at the moment, actually, which is pretty interesting. A side story. Anyway, I'll now move you on to Benjy. We're moving on. Last time we heard from Benjy, we were talking about this courageous American who I think was probably the man behind Captain America. I'd love to look into that and see if that was the case or not. And we're moving on to Benjy. Over to you.
All right, so we're on to the attack of the dead men. So the battle of the... Now, this is in Polish, so I'm going to mispronounce this. Apologies. The battle of the Osivak Fortress in 1915.
My great-grandfather's Polish. Doesn't mean I know anything about Polish people, but sort of. Anyway.
Well, you're allowed to mispronounce it.
I can pronounce it, yes, that's right.
We'll forgive you.
Cool.
So the Battle of Osivak Fortress in 1915. So the Germans had launched a full frontal offensive on the Osivak Fortress, and this thing's a big, massive castle on a hill. At the beginning of July, the attack included 14 battalions of infantry, 1 battalion of sappers, 24 to 30 heavy siege cannons, and 30 batteries of artillery. Equipped with poison gas and led by Field Marshal Paul von Hindenburg.
Oh, as in of the Hindenburgs?
Of the Hindenburgs, who go on to be President of Germany.
There you go.
After the war. Very important man.
The big balloon.
And yes, the big balloon of Hindenburg
the dirigible.
fame.
Indeed. And we all know someone, isn't it, strange side note, that has a bit of the Hindenburg. I did. Grew up in the UK. I had a friend of the family whose father had a piece. It was and it was had a plaque, and it said it was part of the Hindenburg. I had an uncle that had a bit of the wood from the propeller of the Hindenburg, and it was all, we took it as read. It may not be. They may have been sold a piece of someone's Ford Escort, but we thought it was the Hindenburg.
Actually, my uncle has I think it's a 1/1,000,000th scale replica of the Hindenburg dirigible, and it's a big, massive thing. I don't know how to. It's an audio podcast, so I can't show you how far apart
as we speak
my arms
now.
are.
He's got big arms.
It's a big, massive model of the Hindenburg, which is very cool. That
anyway,
bought off somebody in a market somewhere who was about to throw it out, which is unbelievable. But anyway,
let's go. Sorry,
we digress.
I digressed. Sorry. I digress, particularly after a good meal.
Please, mate, this is a serious podcast.
Sorry. Have you got something for my... Not. I should go to the chemist. Have you got something for my digression? Sorry.
So, the Battle of Osavek Fortress. So the Russian defences were manned by up to 500 soldiers. So on dawn, on August the 6th, 1915, a tailwind was on the entire front. And Field Marshal von Hindenburg ordered chlorine gas.
Nasty. Nasty, nasty, nasty. Is it similar to mustard gas?
I think, as we'll get into in a minute, I think chlorine's much, much worse.
Okay, sorry, I'll let you carry on. Yeah.
So I think the mustard gas mainly affects the eyes.
Yeah.
I think the mustard gas
temporarily
blinds you, whereas we'll find out the chlorine gas does terrible things.
Right.
So yes, at dawn on August the 6th, with high winds across the front, Field Marshal Paul von Hindenburg ordered chlorine artillery shells and just general bombs released from barrage balloons. Following the release of the gas, German artillery opened fire on the fortress with both conventional shells and more chlorine shells. More than 1,600 people were killed in the bombardment.
Wow.
So, naturally after all that, the Germans were expecting to sort of just roll over the defences. So 7,000 Germans advanced through the smoke and the mist of the bombardment, expecting little resistance. They were shocked when 100 disfigured Russians emerged from the trenches, coughing up blood and pieces of their own lungs. So, chlorine gas gets into your lungs and mixes with the moisture in your lungs, and basically your lungs melt from the inside out.
Oh my god.
And they start to dissolve, so...
Oh my god.
Sort of the most horrible death I could probably imagine.
Yeah, and here, again, I mean, this is a music podcast as well, so I'll take it back to the music on that respect.
Yeah, sorry, it's getting a bit heavy in this one.
No, I like the heaviness, that's cool. It's heavy metal tones. No, but we're heavy. It's just that it's a very daring subject, isn't it? I mean, let's be honest. I mean, Slayer did, Angel of Death, and I, and of being of Jewish descent, I understand that it can be really hard hitting and hard to listen to, and sometimes not entertainment. But bands like these guys, it's not entertainment, and I mean that in a sort of, it's infotainment. You know what I mean? Sort of. It's entertaining, but it's powerfully can't get the words out. Informative.
Yeah, like we discussed in, or we mentioned in episode 1, it's not about glorifying these things in war, but it's about sort of, I don't know, it is hard to explain. Yeah. It's about glorifying the deeds and the bravery sort of thing, not the war itself, but about these remarkable people that achieved remarkable things in a remarkable period of history.
And I think they capture it musically. I really think they capture it. I think the power metal is the wrong term for them, because power metal would not capture this. Power metal just wouldn't capture it.
No. Power metal to me is, it's swords, it's dragons, it's it's inherently silly.
Yeah, very high falsetto vocals.
Yes, very, very high. And Joachim Broden from Sabaton is definitely a baritone. He doesn't do the high.
No.
He's not a King Diamond. He's a low.
Yeah, growling, but not growling, but
not growling, but it's a deep rumble.
Yeah, amazing, really.
Which I think fits the subject matter very well. I don't think I could take it seriously if it was...
And that's what I'm saying. It's what I get back... I mean, I'm sorry, I've sidetracked because I got a little bit
Well, this is a music podcast, not exclusively history.
No,
so
but it was just the image of a man's lungs melting suddenly. I had to go somewhere else. Sorry.
Bring it.
But no. This is very important because people listening to this have to understand this stuff happened, and there will be someone listening to us today, somewhere around the world, who is related to one of those people.
Absolutely.
Somewhere, and they may not remember or even care to remember, but bands like this are keeping this sort of heroism and downright stupidity as well alive. This one is because we're talking about heroics here, but it's also a lot of stupidity as well.
Oh, absolutely.
In that respect. But anyway, carry on. Lung melting man.
The stupidity of war in general. Yeah. So, shelled with chlorine gas. So they expected, obviously, to just sort of roll over the defences. So the Russians rose from the trenches like zombies back from the dead. And these are men literally coughing up their lungs, pieces of their lungs, faces melting off. Like, this is the most horrific thing you can ever imagine. So the Russians rose from the trenches, opened fire, and attacked the Germans and managed to push them back.
Wow, can you imagine? So they've been shelled with this unimaginable modern warfare, because it is modern to that point. Chlorine gas would have been a modern a way of fighting, and not armed with gas masks. Why would they have gas masks? They would have known gas masks,
especially being the Russians were again
poorly equipped,
poorly trained.
Yeah. And they still managed. I mean, I would have just crawled out. I mean, no disrespect, I would probably rolled over and died. But these guys have got up and kept going. It's just unbelievable.
So yeah, I think most of the troops were incapacitated and then sort of just literally rose zombie-like from the dead to defend this trench.
That'd be a good movie for that one, wouldn't there?
Absolutely. Obviously freaking the Germans out. So the Germans were so shocked they retreated that rapidly back through their own lines that they managed to run into their own machine gun fire, into their own artillery, through their own traps that they'd been setting as they'd been advancing through.
Oh, I mean, no one wants innocent people to die, but that's pretty spectacular, isn't it?
Absolutely, as these sort of ghouls rose from the grave to defend their trench, which is absolutely.
And could we wind back a few seconds? What was the name of the place they were defending? Oswek Fortress. Thank you.
So again, there's probably somebody listening in Poland that can look out their window and go, "Oh, hey,
Oswek, Poland. Oh.
I can see that place from my house." Or
yep.
I know where that is. Or
it's a beautiful country, Poland. So I can imagine there's people there. Yeah.
There'll be somebody listening that has a link to this tragic event. So the zombie-like Russians rose from the trenches, opened fire, and managed to run off the Germans.
Wow. And what's the lyric attached to that one that you want to talk about?
They'll be fighting for their lives as the enemy revives. Russians won't surrender, no, striking fear into their foe.
Wow. And, I mean, it's just incredible, isn't it? And do you think, I think back at, there's a story, I won't go into the full story, but there's a battle in the Second World War, Hill 4, where the British were defending, they were stopping the Japanese coming into, I think it was Burma. If I got it wrong, I'm sorry. And, this one 21-year-old sergeant gets the Victoria Cross because they'd buried into the hillside, these British, and they were fighting off the Japanese who were just coming and rolling over and dying in waves of hundreds and hundreds. And he could see that his fellow combatants down in the trenches were running out of ammunition and were being overrun. So he ran down with pockets full of ammunition, he chucked it at his mates, and then he stood on the hill, 2 Tommy guns, I can just see it, and he's firing like rapidly these 2 Tommy guns at these Japanese, and they kill him instantly. I mean, he's a sitting target. 21 years old. I don't know if I could do that at 21 years old. You know what I mean? I think back, what was I doing at 21? I wasn't running down a hill with 2 machine guns.
No, absolutely not.
So these levels of heroism is just incredible. Anyway, back to you, my friend. Sorry.
Well, yeah, so obviously the Russians were all sort of killed to the man by the end of the day, but they managed to hold their part of the line or their trench long enough for the rest of the Russian forces who burned down the fortress, well, attempted to burn it down and managed to flee back to safety. But yeah, absolutely. Speaking of heroism,
yeah. So what was
when you're dying in a trench of mustard, not mustard gas, chlorine gas? Like, I couldn't think of anything worse. But to stand back up and go, hang on.
Yeah, and you've got guns fired at you.
Yeah, absolutely. You're still under constant artillery bombardment and all that sort.
Yeah.
And unbelievable.
Do you think though they in somewhere in their deep racing DNA of their mind they went, we're dead anyway. Let's just go as we can. Take some out. You know.
Absolutely, that's probably part of it.
Yeah. Sell
your life as dearly as possible.
Yeah, and that's that's a very apt term. That sell your life dearly. You know, I mean, it's easy to. I mean, we all know the images of senseless murder as the Brits. 60,000. Was there 60,000 a day?
The first day of the Battle of the Somme. Yeah,
60,000.
60,000 dead or wounded.
If you think about it, people out there listening to this, if you're sports fans, or if you think about the capacity of your football ground, so in England, say West Ham's capacity is 58,000, Wembley is 100,000, 100 over. You think about the capacity. The MCG is 80,000. That's almost the entire capacity of a major sporting arena in one day killed. It beggars belief.
It is hard. That's one of the things a lot of people sort of getting into the First World War for the first time, or it's just that the numbers are so huge that they don't mean anything. Like what's 100,000 men or millions of men? Like it means nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
When it's just facts written on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
It's probably the best way I can think of explaining it. Imagine your local sports stadium, however many people that fits.
Yeah.
Imagine them dead in a day.
And
then just multiply that day after day after day after day.
And then not just that, but the exponential knock-on. Each one of those people would have had mums, dads, brothers, sisters, wives and children. And, you take the 60,000, and if you think in 1918... the average household size of the UK was 4. So if you take that and times that by 60,000, that's a number that I can't even, because it is the knock-on effect. Yes, that they didn't all die. The 60,000 died, but the lives that they changed back in the country they're from is just. And again, I know it's a music podcast, so it's getting heavy, guys. I mean, but. It's really brave, very brave, because bands can be mocked. I know a few other bands that tend to sort of add a war-based theme to their music, and it is almost, not mocking is the wrong word, but it's almost flippant. Whereas these guys don't. There's a definite reverence in their music and their lyrics.
Like I say, it's quite easy to sort of attach yourself to like the war or World War II or stuff like that, just to be edgy, just to make a name for yourself, or for the imagery. We all know people that do that.
Oh God, yes. I mean, there's some form of disgust, I think, when you see someone walking down the street. And I saw it recently in Sydney. Someone's walking down the street and they're in like US Army Second World War outfit. Now maybe he's a nutter, and that's probably fine.
Good possibility.
He probably is a nutter, but at the same time, it's not good taste. No. I like bad taste. Don't get me wrong. I love a bit of bad taste, but there is a point where you go, no. This is a sidetrack story before we go to the break. My brother. I'm going to say this because it doesn't matter to you guys. No one's going to know my brother. My brother had this thing for collecting Nazi memorabilia, very much like Lemmy did. Now, my brother was not a Nazi. My older brother Andrew was not a Nazi by any shadow of the state, not at all. He was just fascinated with the badges and the memorabilia, like the insignia. It wasn't about the Nazis. It was about
The style.
The style, and let's be honest, they were very, very stylish. And a side note, it is actually fallacy that the fashion designer Hugo Boss invented the outfits. He did not. In fact, he supplied the cloth like thousands of other factories during the Second World War. Anyway, that side note. And I remember he decided one day to wear an Iron Cross. Why? I have absolutely no idea. And we're walking down the street. Now, I grew up in a rather large Jewish community. So you can imagine, he's walking it, and he had it on around his neck. And you could just barely see it. And it was a hot summer's day. I remember we were going past, oh God, the Reformed Synagogue in Hendon Central. And this guy comes out, and he was in his 40s at the time. And I thought he was going to break my brother. Man, he was so angry. And Andrew took it off. Fair enough, he took it off, put it in his pocket. And we went home, and he was shaking. And I said, why did you wear it? And he said, I didn't think it would... And this is the thing, people don't think. He didn't think that... And this was 40 years ago. This is not that far from the war. 2 generations, 3 generations. And I just remember, I could see the day he was such an idiot. Because he didn't wear it with reverence. He just did it because he thought it looked good. You know what I mean? Anyway, side note, sorry, I'm rambling.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thing. I mean, if you're walking down the street just sort of wearing Third Reich or war memorabilia, it's probably not the best way to be going about it.
Yeah, I mean, we used to go to some really... I used to go to these places in Camden under the arches and to these militaria shops that had all this sort of dodgy Second World War stuff. Honestly, the stuff we used to buy, like tank badges, oak leaf clusters, death's heads. He bought a pair of jack boots that had blood in them. Crazy stuff. Please, listeners, don't think I'm a Nazi. But no, he wasn't. I'm going to absolutely say he wasn't a Nazi and he wasn't a sympathiser. He just had this really morbid sense of what was interesting, you know?
No, look, we're often intrigued by the I don't know, how do you explain it? The horrors.
Yeah.
And how, I mean, the Nazis are intriguing.
Yeah. I think for Andrew, it was more we are Jewish, and it was a sort of...
well, there's that element.
A little bit of Schadenfreude in if you can use a German word.
Something forbidden, so it's
I think
it's a little bit spicier.
I think it was. He had a Nazi. He managed to get hold of a flag that was flown at one of the rallies. I mean, it was just the underground world that these people lived in. You know.
I mean, I can relate to that. We've got a few here in Canberra. A few military stores and stuff like that, and I remember being a younger man going in. And look, I've got a collection of war stuff at home. I've got a Nazi M35 helmet. I've got an American helmet. Yeah. I've got a few Nazi daggers.
Yeah, but your war in general.
I've got badges. I've got American stuff. I'm the war in general.
Yeah.
I'm by no means a Nazi sympathiser or anything like that.
Yeah.
Again, I'm fascinated by that period and that side of history.
Yeah, and I think that's what shows in this podcast, but also the reverence and the music that they come through.
I probably wouldn't wear an Iron Cross down the street. It might.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, look, I mean, it was bloody stupid. I mean, I have to honestly say, we're lucky we got away with our lives, to be fair. I was probably at 9 or 10 when that happened. And so it's like, what's that, 80, 81?
I mean, it can be, you can wear them in ironic sort of ways. I mean...
Well, the Pistols did.
I was about to say, Sid Vicious...
Yeah, it was irony, and it was irony, you know.
And it was about being shocking.
Yes.
Lots of people use Nazi imagery just to shock.
Of course.
To be edgy. It's
creates
nothing...
talking points,
Absolutely.
Right? But he just was an idiot. I'm not going to stand on any corner and say he was a down the wall stupid idiot, because he didn't get it. And it wasn't until much later years, I mean, that we've been thinking about this recently, that it started me thinking about just how much negative energy that he had in that house. I mean, that's a different podcast and a different story, but, it was never really nice going into his room. And it was probably to do with the amount of you know, if there's a pair of jackboots with blood in it, who knows what happened in those boots? You know.
Yeah,
he had Hitler
absolutely.
Youth knives. He had, you know, you name it, trench coat. He had a German trench coat. Anyway, back to the song. Sorry. So we've gone to the fact that the music is heavy and hard, and it is quite confronting. We've had the zombies of the Russian. What's next?
So up next we have the Devil Dogs, the United States Marine Corps.
All right. Well, I've just realised before, as we go on there, we've talked for 25 minutes without a break. So we'll have a quick break and we'll get on to the Devil Dogs.
We'll shill some capitalism.
That's the way.
Buy some goodies.
Bye now.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months required. New subscribers only. Renew for 12 months to lock in savings. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See mintmobile.com.
Welcome back, guys, to part 2. I hope you enjoyed those words of capitalism. Did you buy the mattress that it mentioned you to get? And whatever it says you might like to buy?
I usually get ads for Subway, which is alright, because I quite enjoy
Ooh.
a good Subway
I
sandwich.
must admit, eat fresh. Although I did ruin it for my friend once and tell them they all taste the same.
You're not getting the right subs, mate.
No, I'm not getting the right subs. Maybe I should get the German subs.
I think
Anyway, back on to part 2. So what are we on to now? Devil Dogs, I believe.
I like that, the German subs. Bit of war humour there for you.
Yes, there you go.
Alright, so the Devil Dogs. So we'll start off with a little bit of history. So the United States Marine Corps traces its back to the Continental Marines of the American Revolutionary War.
Ah.
So the Continental Marines were basically the soldiers assigned to the ships to fight.
Right.
So every battleship had a small detachment of Marines, which
Yep.
were the sort of the Marine fighters.
Yep.
Captain Samuel Nichols in the Second Continental Congress on the 10th of November, 1775. That was the
Cool.
birth of the Marine Corps, as it's known.
Right.
So just a little bit of history there. So we move on to the Battle of Belleau Wood in June 1918. So the German propaganda, I believe, were the first... Well, this is sort of in dispute. They don't know whether it was the Germans that came up with this nickname or the Americans themselves for propaganda. The Teufelsschund, or the Dogs from Hell, is what the Germans called the American troops.
Yeah. And side note, this music, when you listen to this particular track, because I listened to it again yesterday, it's. I think it's probably my favourite on the album.
This is one of my favourite tracks off the album.
Yeah, it really thunders, and it has this sense of space, which I think is pretty amazing, because it's a lot to get in it. It's quite a spacious piece of music.
It is. It is. So this song in particular is about the Marine Corps battled for 3 weeks for control of Belleau Wood. Where are we? Sorry, I've just lost my spot. So the Marines assaulted the German lines on Hill 142 5 times. 5 times over the course of a week.
Wow.
And were repelled, but on the 6th attack they managed to break through and eradicate the Germans from the forest.
Wow. And this particular forest was an extremely important part of, I suppose, of the front.
I mean, all war's awful, but particularly fighting in forests is particularly hellish, especially with all the artillery.
The splintering.
Basically, it just amplifies the effects of all the artillery and all the bullets and all the grenades, because it doesn't just explode, it explodes and then the tree explodes and sends millions of splinters here, there and everywhere.
Well, this interesting you should say that, because I listened to a podcast the other day about this, and people think that people die of being shot by the bullet, right? Not necessarily. It's the dirt that gets in after the bullet hits. When a bullet hits the body in certain areas, if it's in the body and you can stop the bleeding, you're generally okay. It's the who was it who died of his splinters? Not Napoleon.
Reinhard Heydrich in the Second World War. Yeah.
Thank you. So he was shot in his car, but it was the horsehair in his seats that got into the wound that got
horsehair filling that gave him blood poisoning that he eventually died for. But so that's an interesting point. So the First World War is where sort of frontline medicine goes from you've been shot, we're going to saw your arm off, to actual medicine. How can we
save them?
How can we save them as best as possible so they can come back and fight again, sort of thing. So a lot of sort of like the American Civil War and the Napoleonic War. I mean, plenty of people were shot and killed outright, but most of the deaths, you were shot in the arm or something like that.
You died of blood poisoning.
And it was the blood poisoning from whatever was on the bullet, or as the bullet went through your tunic, it was the fibres of everything that got stuck in your blood that killed you. It wasn't actually...
It's incredible when you think about it.
It wasn't actually the gunshot, but because they had no idea of germs or antibiotics or anything like that, it was the most basic sort of medicine.
As long as you could stop the bleeding, you would survive.
And even then, if you had a broken arm, they'd just saw your arm off because they didn't know any better. They didn't know how to fix it. They couldn't fix it.
Amazing. Yeah. Sorry, we sidetracked. We're talking about these dogs of war.
The dogs of war? Yes, so the Marines, after their sixth assault, had finally kicked the Germans out of the forest. So it was First Sergeant Dan Daly, a recipient of 2 Medals of Honour, which is...
Wow.
I'm going to have to look deeper into this guy, because 2 Medals of Honour is ridiculous. He might be one of the only gentlemen in history to be awarded 2 Medals of Honour.
Wow.
But he led his men forward with the very famous cry, "Come on, you sons of bitches, do you want to live forever?"
Wow. You could read that into 2 ways, couldn't you? Do you want to live forever as in be immortal to win this battle, or do you want to live tomorrow?
I think it's more of who's afraid of dying.
Yeah.
Do you want to live forever? Let's just get in there and get it done.
Yeah. There's a
which
job.
Which is very much the American spirit at the time of just get it done.
Yeah. Well, they didn't. I mean, they won the Revolutionary War for good reason, didn't they? In that respect, powerful nation, the Americans. Even in a fledgling nation like they were then.
Absolutely. Sort of, and especially in this period, sort of like slow to anger, but once you've roused,
you're not
going to stop them.
Yep.
It's going to be a bad time.
Yeah.
So I'll just briefly mention my lyric of this. Second to none, a Marine and his gun, raising hell as they're fighting like dogs of war. Heart of the core and part of the law, the deadliest weapon on earth.
Didn't you love that? Like that there that's a great lyric. That.
So I think it was...
Heads of the core and parts of the law. That's brilliant.
Look, I may be badly butchering and misquoting this, but I think it was... I can't remember which American president that said the deadliest weapon on earth is a Marine and a rifle.
Yeah, you probably got it spot on, and it's the truth, right? That's.
So yeah, apologies, I can't remember which president said that, and I don't want to misquote it, but...
Wow. That's a great lyric. I mean, it bounces, it scans, it's powerful.
I think that's part of the main chorus, actually, that line. So it's repeated a few times to great effect.
Particularly love this, heart of the core and part of the law. It's very easy to make a lyric scan and fall out of place, but that's really quite a solid lyric. Second to none, a marine and a gun.
And it just flows so
It
well.
flows really nice. If I wrote that, I'd go, I'm done now. No more lyrics.
That's it.
That's it. I'm done. Thank you very much.
That's my contribution.
Bye-bye. You just watch the checks roll in. Yeah. Now we're coming up to something that's particularly a thing I'm particularly favourite of, which is the...
So this is probably somebody that everybody's sort of familiar with in one way or another. The Red Baron.
Yes. Not Lord Flashheart. The Red Baron.
The Red Baron. Not the terrible beer brewed in Victoria.
It's terrible. No, it's awful, people. If you've ever drunk it...
It is awful. I made a reference to Manfred von Richthofen on their website and they had no idea what I was talking about. I'm like, okay.
Sorry about laughing loudly into the mic there. If it ever hurt your ears, I wasn't expecting that one. That's it.
So yes, this is going to be an interesting one. So yes, Manfred von Richthofen, the ace of aces.
The man in the sky.
I mean, he wasn't the top scoring ace, but he was the most famous. You could mention the Red Baron to somebody walking past on the street today and they'd go, oh, that's the guy from the First World War, isn't it?
Yeah, he was a pin-up boy, wasn't he? He was a good-looking, very Aryan...
So on both sides of the war, I have to say the pilots were sort of the rock stars of the First World War.
Yeah.
So, look, just for some clarity, so we're talking 1915 here. So the Wright brothers' first flight was 1908, I believe.
Yep. Yes, it was indeed.
So planes have been around for 4 or 5 years, maybe. Literally the most cutting edge of technology.
Yeah. And you know, dangerous.
Oh, they're exceedingly dangerous.
It's extremely dangerous. I mean,
if you've ever seen any of these old biplanes, they are wood and cloth.
Yeah.
The only metal parts are the engines and the guns.
And I don't believe these particular early parts of the planes were fighting planes. I don't think they had synced machine guns with the props.
No, so
it was just to drop stuff into the trenches.
One of the advantages the Germans had was the twin facing machine guns that would fire through. So the engine was synced to the machine guns.
Right.
So the propeller, your machine guns would fire through the gap in your propeller as everything was working in sync together.
That's right.
Which is ridiculous, like how they came up with this.
Because when you think about it, someone's going, how do we fire our guns through this? Oh, we can sink the gun into the chamber and the trigger going from as the piston drops. This is crazy. Yeah.
So I forget the actual term for it.
Yeah, there is a term. I have.
There is a term. But yeah, the engine was
is good enough.
The engine was synced to the machine gun, so you could fire. Basically, you could fire forward through as you were flying.
Yeah, I think the Germans had it, but the Brits didn't. Did they at the time?
I think eventually the British figured out how to do it through captured.
Because they were Tiger moths, weren't they? Yeah.
So any recovered German aircraft, you'd sort of you'd reverse engineer it, and they'd figured it out by sort of the middle of the war. But yes, so Manfred von Richthofen. So Richthofen was born in Kleinberg near Breslau in Lower Silesia. I believe is Poland now. But it was Prussia at the time. Born into an aristocratic family of Prussian heritage.
As in the Baron?
As in the Baron. The von is a hint in his name.
Yes.
Indicates aristocracy.
It does indeed, yes.
So he was in the cavalry at first. So the cavalry was probably the most gentlemanly of the aristocratic sort of thing. If you were from a proper aristocratic family, you weren't a foot soldier, you were a cavalryman.
Oh, you would be.
You rode around on your fancy horse in your fancy outfit.
Yep, and you were usually at the back.
Yes. So he was a runner for the cavalry. I believe he delivered water and food and stuff to the
front line.
To the front lines, which he was not happy with.
I can't imagine if he's from a posh family.
Yeah, from a posh family, and a young man wanting to do his bit from the war, wanting to get in there and be a hero, and this is still the beginning of the war, so it's all about the romanticism and heroics and and doing your
chivalry.
Chivalry, exactly. So disappointed and uninspired by his non-combative role, he had a chance meeting with another pilot. I believe his name was Hans Bockler. So I think he was one of the first German fighter aces who sort of said, oh, hey man, if you're not happy in the cavalry, how about you come join the Air Force? We've only just sort of created it.
Wow.
You're a young, inspired young man. I think you'd do well in this new Air Force. Which he did. He joined the Fliegertruppen in 1915, which I'm assuming is just the Air Force at the time.
Yeah.
And he absolutely excelled. So by 1917, he'd already been awarded the Pour le Mérite, the Blue Max.
Oh, the Blue Max, yes.
So the Blue Max was the highest medal for sort of bravery in the First World War.
Because there was a very good movie that they made about him in the 70s, The Red Baron.
Yeah.
And they do mention the Blue Max.
The good thing about the Red Baron is there will be 100,000 movies, books, podcasts, everything.
Yeah.
He's one of those.
He's like the sex symbol with the First World War.
One of those enduring legends that will never sort of fall out of style or fashion. So yes, awarded the Blue Max on his 16th confirmed air kill, and he was appointed leader of the Jag-Staffel 11.
Wow.
Which was sort of filled with all the stars. It was sort of the number one air unit. It was where they put all the
all the aces.
All the aces, basically. So Richthofen led his new squadron to unparalleled success, peaking during the Bloody April campaign of 1917, where he shot down 22 British aircraft, including 4 in a single day.
Wow.
By the end of the month, the British had lost 245 aircraft.
You weren't surviving that because it was only wood and canvas. Once you come out of the air, and you hit the deck, you're gone.
So there's a movie called Flyboys, which was, I think, released late sort of 2000s, and it deals with sort of the French. So early on in the war, before America had joined the war, the France had appealed to America and gone, hey, if you guys can send us any soldiers or anything like that, you'll be made citizens of France, you'll this, that, and the other. We know that America's not contributing combat troops, but you'll be rewarded in some way. One of the units that they came up with was called the Lafayette Escadrille, and that was the French Flying Corps, filled with Americans. So they went, all right, we're going to make just an entire unit filled with American volunteers.
Wow.
And anyway, in the movie, in one of the scenes, so all these young Americans rock up and they're sort of getting into their planes for the first time. And one of the Frenchmen in charge hands them all a pistol. And one of the Americans goes, oh, what am I supposed to do with this? Lean out of me plane and shoot at the other guy? And the Frenchman goes, no, that's for you. If your plane gets hit and catches on fire, you either burn to death or you jump out of the plane and plummet to the ground.
Or shoot yourself.
Or the third option is to shoot yourself. Which sort of stuns all the these young cowboys that go, oh, this is serious, isn't it?
Far out. I would never have thought about that.
Wow. Like I say, because the planes are made, they're just canvas and wood.
Yeah.
So as soon as you get a spark or something like that, the plane just lights up.
Yep. Wow.
And you're not going to survive. Very rarely did you survive a crash in one of these planes.
Yeah, and the bullets that went through it would have gone straight into you. Jeez.
So, there's a bit of a depressing thought to think about.
But you can see what you're talking about, how they were a very important part of the campaign, of the whole war, really. Along with tank. He takes us nicely back to tanks in the very first episode.
Absolutely. So, like the tanks, the planes they played their part in the First World War, but it wouldn't be till the Second World War that they really sort of came into their own as...
Well, the Brits had one ethos in the Second World War, and that was machines, not flesh. Steel, not flesh. So they would rather lose machinery than human lives.
So we'll get into that a little bit later.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's about now. So Manfred Richthofen is in charge of Jagdstaffel 11. So he fills it with his many of his family members who are also pilots, and all the other sort of young aces. It's about now he decides to paint his plane red, the famous scarlet red, where the Red Baron comes from. And other members of his squad decided to sort of paint their planes as well, sort of ostentatious colours, so like red and bright green and yellows and...
It didn't really matter, did it?
And that sort of stuff, because they went, well, if our chief's... everybody knows he's in the bright red plane.
Yeah.
We may as well all colour our aircraft and sort of thing. And this is where the Flying Circus name came from.
There we go.
So because these gentlemen were sort of so popular and successful and good at what they did, they were transferred quite frequently from one front to another. And they'd sort of rock up in this big baggage train of trucks and tents and all sorts of stuff and brightly coloured planes, and they were all handsome young knights of the sky, and so they sort of got designated the Flying Circus, which they adopted and sort of embraced as their nickname. Sorry, just taking a sip of my
No,
beer.
it's very nice. Yes, I'm drinking my tea, which is lovely. So this is the last track on this album, is it not? On this particular one?
No, I think there's two or three more.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get my head around where we are. Okay, cool.
Sorry, I've just lost my spot in my notes. Alright, on the morning of April 1918. The morning of April 1918, that doesn't make sense.
No.
On a morning in April
1918,
while flying with his cousin, Wolfram von Richthofen, they encountered a squad of Canadians over the Molencourt Ridge, over the Somme battlefield. So Lieutenant Wolfram was attacked by a Canadian fighter. Seeing this, the Baron sort of intervened to help his cousin. Because they were flying so low over the ridge, the British soldiers would... I mean, because these planes are made out of wood and cloth, you could do reasonable damage with them from the ground with just handheld weapons.
Yeah.
If they were unlucky enough. So unfortunately, while saving his cousin, the Baron's plane was struck by a single 303 round from a British rifle.
Early Enfield, I would say. Yep.
So it went through the left side of his plane, it penetrated his body, went through his heart and his lungs, fatally wounding him instantly.
Wow.
So he saved his cousin, he managed to run off the Canadians, and then he crash landed in a field close by.
Wow.
So it's, again, one of those contentious things. Nobody really knows who fired the shot that killed him. It's pretty much assumed to be the Australians shot him down because he was over the an Australian part of the line.
I have heard that, yes.
So I think the most agreed upon, because obviously everybody claims that they shot down the Red Baron, and when there's 100 dudes shooting at a plane flying over, you don't know who it was. But I think they've narrowed it down to it was one of 3 Australian dudes that happened to be there at the time that were shooting at him. Hard to identify exactly who it was. But so he crash landed. I think he was dead on.
Yeah, impact.
On impact, or very shortly after his mortal wounds. His body was recovered by the Australians. If you look up sort of famous World War One art, that's one of the famous paintings. I think it's in the Australian War Memorial, but you can obviously see it online. Is the Australian troops recovering the Red Baron's body from his crashed plane.
Wow.
He was buried by the Australians with full military honours,
As you'd expect.
as you'd expect from a worthy adversary. I think parts of his plane, like everything, are sort of all over the place. There's a few parts in the Australian War Memorial. I think they've got his flying boots
And the tail.
and like his tail and like
Yeah.
one of the machine guns. I know Peter Jackson, the New Zealand film director, has a few pieces of his plane because he has through his family, he's got a direct sort of
Oh, to the person that might have shot him down.
contact with the people who were there. I think his great-grandfather or something like that. His family members were intimately involved with it, so he's got a few parts of it. So he was 25.
He's a boy, really.
25 when he died. So most of the pilots, well, all of the pilots were all young men,
Yeah. Young.
because the older men were all in the trenches
Wow.
doing their bit, and they wanted, sort of the young men
Yeah.
in the planes. So he died at age 25 with a record of 80 victories.
That's a lot.
One of the top scoring aces of World War One.
Wow.
So he remains today one of the most interesting and famous flying aces. Like I say, you can mention the Red Baron to
And people know
probably
it.
anybody in the world.
Yep.
If you're walking down the street in the Sahara Desert
Yeah.
and you mentioned the Red Baron, somebody'd probably know. From films and books to Snoopy, even Peanuts.
Yeah, he is. That's right. He's got the goggles on the top of
The
his...
Red Baron, when he's sleeping on his doghouse and imagining that he's flying,
Yep, I think we've got
fighting
that
the
somewhere.
Red Baron. Yep. So absolutely one of those enduring names.
Yeah. And I think musically as well, it's quite open again. Like they've really sort of grabbed that soaring aspect of it and that feel of freedom when you listen to this music as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
That sort of-
and a fantastic film clip as well.
Oh, yeah, and again, brilliant film clip. And that sort of just draws it all together really nicely, doesn't it? Hey, we better go for one more break because we've got a little bit more to do. We've gone a little bit longer than I thought we would today, which is fine. That's no problem. And we'll come back off the other side and we'll have a chat about the last part of the album. Okay, bye, guys. Hi guys, welcome back to part 3 of this extended War-a-thon music marathon, where Benjy Murphy has been enlightening us with some very, very interesting war-based facts to mix with your listening pleasure from Sabaton's War to End All Wars. We're now going to move on to the last 2 tracks on the album, I believe. I will pass you over to Benjy, and away we go.
Alright, so we have the Fields of Verdun. So, Verdun, just the name makes you think of death and destruction on an unimaginable scale. The battle designed to be a meat grinder would live up to its reputation and then some. The mill on the Meuse would take the horror and destruction to another level that nobody thought possible. 774,000 dead on both sides in 11 months. So the longest continuous battle of the war and one of the most horrifying, which is saying something in the First World War that this was known as a...
774,000 people
in 11 months
Oh my god!
of action.
Wow. I mean, if you worked it, if you worked it out, that'd be what, just under 60,000 a month, sort of around. Like my maths, I'm not a maths genius, but I mean, compared to the first days of the Somme, different. But my God, over a sustained time,
the level of just continuous attrition at Verdun, I think, was even when things weren't, there weren't major offensives happening, it was just a grind.
Wow.
It was just, which is what it was designed to be. It was just designed to grind the French army down.
Yeah. And if you think about that, and musically as well, I mean, I again listened to the Fields of Verdun on the coach back from Sydney yesterday, and it really does. It's oppressive as a track. I mean, you might think it's not, because it's like, how can it be? It's entertainment, but it's really heavy. It's an extremely difficult song. All of them. I mean, I've said this before, I'm repeating myself, but they're all difficult subject matters, aren't they? None of them are, let's sit down and write a song about daisies and ponies and... I mean, this is heavy shit.
It's a very heavy subject matter.
Yeah. 774, oh my God, okay.
So Verdun's been a pretty important city in France for a while, a couple of thousand years. So, I mean, if you Google the Battle of Verdun, it'll come up with... There's been a couple of battles of Verdun over the centuries.
So it's an important part in France.
It is. So it was sort of an important strategic, sort of fortified city on the way to Paris.
Right.
It was one of the main obstacles if you were trying to
Hence
march
the
on.
reason there's 774,000 dead. Right.
So knowing that the French would throw everything into a battle for the ancient town, the Germans made their move on the 21st of February. Over the course of 10 hours, 808 artillery pieces would fire 1 million shells. 1 million shells into the bank.
My God.
Of the river. I think at the time it was the highest concentration of artillery in any one spot.
Oh, I can't imagine.
In the history of anything ever.
I can't imagine it even would get topped now, would it?
I think some of the battles afterwards surpassed it.
Wow.
I think the Battle of the Somme and stuff like that were hundreds of millions of artillery shells fired in a certain amount of time.
Let's be honest, the only one making any money out or anything out of this war is the people making munitions.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The people selling arms in the First World War. Well, that's how America became the superpower that it is today.
Selling munitions.
Because they sold everything to everybody. In both World Wars, not just the first one.
Wow.
But especially in the First World War, because America wasn't involved until later on in the war. They happily sat out but went, hey, we'll sell whatever we can to everybody because this isn't our fight. But
wow.
Yeah, so the concentration of so much fighting in such a small area for so long absolutely devastated the land around Verdun, resulting in just absolutely hideous conditions. So the heavy French rain combined with the constant tearing up of the ground and the clay turned the area into an absolute wasteland. So if you Google Verdun today, you can still see
the marks.
All the marks.
Wow.
It literally looks like the moon.
Wow.
So rain combined with the constant tearing up of the ground turned the clay of the area into an absolute wasteland and just filled with human bodies. Shell craters would fill with water, becoming so slippery if you fell in, basically you'd drown. And these aren't just shell holes filled with water, they're filled with bodies and sort of the like the byproducts of chemical weapons.
Yeah, the chlorine. And
so it's just this horrific slime sort of thing. It's not really water. And filled with bodies and...
Oh. Wow.
Absolutely horrific. Of all the battlefields in all of human history, Verdun ranks as one of the absolute worst.
But it's not one that rolls off the tongue, isn't it? You think of Passchendaele, you think of the Somme, Ypres. You know, Verdun's not that one that comes to mind.
I think because there was sort of... I mean, this is debatable whether Verdun was of sort of any military importance. It's been sort of debated back and forth.
And that's why it's not mentioned too much?
Yes, it was an important military target that needed to be taken. No, it was just a battle designed to kill Frenchmen.
Ah, okay.
Sort of thing. But either way, it basically just ground up both sides. So the French eventually did end up defending Verdun and holding it to the last sort of man.
Wow.
They shall not pass was the catch cry of the...
So it wasn't just wizards.
French, yeah. So for all you Lord of the Rings fans...
It wasn't just wizards.
Wasn't just Gandalf the Grey. So as well as the men sort of out suffering in the trenches and the mud, there were a series of forts around Verdun that had been built sort of over the years and the centuries, and a lot of them weren't particularly useful because most of the sort of the guns and the cannons and the weapons had been stripped off all these big forts to be put in other places.
Yeah.
But still, these are big, massive. I mean, I think most of these places still stand today, so you can Google like sort of Fort Vaux, Fort Dumont,
right,
and some of the other ones. And these things are massive. Like these are enormous, giant constructs of sort of steel and concrete.
Yeah. It's very much like the Germans in the Second World War. Their concrete bunkers across the line.
Absolutely. So, look, these forts weren't particularly useful. They were basically there early on in the war. The French realised that the amount of firepower and stuff like that, these forts aren't going to hold up, but they can still slow people down. So we're still going to jam dudes in them, and it's still a defensive obstacle you get past. And I have to say that was some of the worst fighting was over these forts, because So these are massive things you can imagine with like hundreds of dudes jammed in these corridors. There's no ventilation because you didn't want to get gas, so there's very little air. Yeah. You're hot, you're sweaty, you're in a giant concrete box, basically getting pounded by artillery 24 hours a day. Because that's how you had to batter these forts down. You just had to pound them and pound them and pound them.
Oh my God.
And for the men inside, you think, look, I'd probably rather be inside rather than outside in one of these sorts of battles, but it's sort of a different sort of hellish existence. You're essentially trapped in this big steel coffin getting hammered, and you know the Germans are coming, and you know that they're going to break in eventually. That's what did happen.
Yeah, so they overrun the French in the end?
Yeah, and so some of the worst battles that happen are in these tiny, narrow concrete corridors, basically basements, trying to get into this fort.
So it's all handheld?
So it's these men fighting in the dark with pistols and grenades and bayonets, trying to fight their way into these corridors, and just absolutely horrifying.
Wow.
Some of the worst sort of horror that I could imagine in a war. In a war that's,
already fully horrific.
Already known for how horrific it is.
Yeah.
Verdun was definitely the top of the...
I have to say, this last few weeks that we've been talking about this subject matter, I have changed my mind on the view of the war. I used to think, it's a few trenches and 60,000 people and away you go. You don't really know. It doesn't until you start talking about this sort of stuff. And I mean, it sounds flippant, but the music sort of gets it and sort of doesn't, but at the same time you can see why it was, and it was the most devastating war in history. I mean, pound for pound, body for body, you can see why, can't you? I mean, it's completely senseless as well, but anyway, that's
So one of the worst things about Verdun was, France very early realised that you sort of had to rotate troops out. You couldn't just leave people in the same place for weeks and months on end, otherwise they end up breaking, and that's when you get shell shock and PTSD and all this sort of stuff that was sort of just coming out at this time. Obviously it had been around forever, but...
Yeah, diagnosed. Yeah,
diagnosed properly. So unfortunately, the worst thing about France's sort of rotating system was that everybody got to experience the horrors of Verdun.
So it wasn't just one, it was everyone.
So it wasn't just a couple of isolated units or battalions or whatever. And that's why Verdun is such a sort of, still today in France, is such a upsetting event, because so many people were connected to it.
Oh my God.
Not just the people that were initially sent there or whatever. Everybody got to experience
Jeez.
the horrors of Verdun.
Oh my God.
And like a lot of the World War One battlefields has certain sort of things they were known for. So like the battles in Flanders, it was the mud and the rain.
Yeah.
Because it's the lowlands. And like we're fighting in Belgium again. The lowlands, everything floods.
Yeah.
The mud and the stuff. So Verdun was known for its smell.
Because of the cordite and the...
So just the bodies.
Oh my
So apparently
God.
troops marching up to the Verdun battlefield, before you could hear the guns, before you could see the fires and smell the artillery and stuff, you smelled the
rot.
death, the rot.
I suppose, again, isn't it? It doesn't... I mean, that's very hard to bring across audibly in a music. That'd be very tricky to do.
It's hard to imagine what is essentially a charnel house of unburied corpses, human waste. Because you're living in trenches. Where do you go to the toilet? You throw it over the trench, or you not to be crude, but you shit in the trench next to you, or you bury it, or
Wow, and you just don't think about these things, and it's such a big. Even just this one alone, this one concept on the album alone is massive. I mean, it's just, I don't know how I would even go about trying to write that song. I mean, you've got the lyric here. I don't know. I don't know if I could do it.
Yeah, so I'll read. So my lyric for this one is: as the drum roll started on that day, heard 100 miles away, 1,000,000 shells were fired, and the green fields turned to grey.
Jesus.
So the opening bombardment on the Verdun was
Allegedly.
Stumbling over my words here. Better have another sip of beer. Was allegedly heard as far away as London.
Holy crap. Wow. I believe that. I would absolutely believe it, because it's not that far to the coast in France, Verdun, is it, right?
And so the drum roll is... So drum fire was a certain type of artillery that you sort of... Basically, it was designed to land like a drum roll, so it was the... It was just constant. Thousands of guns firing a couple of seconds after each other, so you got no
relief. Far out.
Because as soon as the artillery stops, that's when everybody runs out of their defences and mans the guns and the trenches, because you know that once the artillery stops, that the opposing troops are coming.
And here's that, we're back to the music, that is actually here, you hear that in the music. It's there. They've really sort of come across, I mean, this, people, this is as progressive as you're going to get in a metal album, this, I reckon. It's such a fantastic piece of progressive music. It's a concept album, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Oh, absolutely.
They may not stick. May not be in order, but it's a concept album after all. Anyway, we better get on to the next one because we're running out of time. Sorry, I want to go on. We're over an hour already. And
so the final song, "Ghost in the Trenches." So I wasn't terribly familiar with this, so this was something that I got to learn about while investigating this. So First Nations Scouts, I should say, is Canadian.
Right.
So Canadian, not Native American, because he's not American. But
no,
Canadian,
First Nations.
First Nations, Canadian, Indian, although I know that's not the correct term.
Yep.
First Nations Scout Francis Pegamagabo.
Yep.
Known as Peggy.
Yep.
To his friends. Credited with killing 378 Germans and capturing 300 more.
Wow.
One of the most highly decorated Indigenous soldiers in Canadian military history and the most devastating sniper of the First World War.
Wow.
In April 1915, Pegamagabo fought in the Second Battle of Ypres, where the Germans used chlorine gas for the first time on the Western Front. It was during this battle that he began to establish a reputation as a sniper and scout. He also took part in the battles of the Somme, where he was wounded in the leg, and received the military medal for carrying messages along the lines during these two battles. On November 6th and 7th, 1917, Peggy earned a bar to his military medal for his actions in the Second Battle of Passchendaele.
Wow.
When the battalion's reinforcements became lost, Peggy was instrumental in guiding them and ensuring them that they reached their allocated spots in the line.
Wow. I mean, that's amazing, isn't it? You think about heroism, one man, and he's a forgotten man because he's an indigenous man,
Absolutely,
right?
And especially being sort of indigenous, they're sort of like disconnected from...
Yeah, and probably considered, this is, God, I'm not saying this but this is what, they probably considered them expandable. They're not, it wasn't until very long ago that Australia, our indigenous people were considered just flora and fauna. So I can imagine that they would just thought, well, chuck you along the line.
Yeah, sort of, oh, look, just another Indian, throw him in the line sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which was, unfortunately, the attitudes of the time.
Yeah. Oh, what an amazing man. Jesus, 300 and plus, gee.
So, on August 30, 1918, during the Battle of Scarpe, Peggy was involved in fighting off a German attack. His company was out of ammunition and in danger of being surrounded. Peggy braved heavy machine gun and rifle fire by going into no man's land and brought back enough ammunition to enable his post to carry on and assist in repulsing heavy enemy counterattacks. For these actions, he received a second bar to his military medal, becoming only one of 39 Canadians to ever receive this honour.
Wow.
Francis survived the war from the start to the finish, returned home and died in 1952.
Oh, see, that's fantastic. He had a full life. I can't imagine he would have been mentally balanced, but what an amazing, yes, he took 374 lives, so he's a killer, like all of them were, but he got back, and we've just talked about 774,000 men and women. They fought in the front as well, who didn't come back. Boys, men, and women. Whereas he made it back. How lucky is he? You think about it. I mean, it's not just luck, but it's skill, and bravery, but it's a fuckload of luck as well, isn't there?
Absolutely. So that's one of the interesting things about the First World War. Sort of the how much sort of the minorities contributed to.
Oh yeah, it's amazing.
Like all they're not Commonwealth nations, but the Dominion.
Yeah. Empire nations.
And the Empire nations.
Yeah.
How much they sort of contributed.
They did. They wanted to as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they weren't forced to. Hey, come here, you do that. They
absolutely.
They wanted to. Look, we have to wrap that up because it has been an hour and 12 minutes on this episode. We will be recording a little special in a few weeks' time. With some of the stuff we didn't get to. As you can see, there's so much to get to.
Maybe a bit of a postscript.
There's been 2 fantastic episodes. I'm really, really stoked with the ability to sit down and chat to Benjy about this. I hope you've enjoyed it. Yes, I know it's not always fully musical. It's been a really learning big curve for me. I know that when I put this album on now that I'm going to think differently to when I listen to it. I think you should all have a listen and see what you think. Again, thank you very much, Benjy, for bringing your knowledge to the show, and I've really enjoyed it, and I hope to have you again on soon.
That's all right, guys. Always a pleasure to talk history and to talk music. And I have to say, look, if anybody's interested in any more of these sort of stories, so Sabaton themselves on their website, all their albums, they have a breakdown of sort of the lyrics and a little bit of history behind the song, which is really interesting. They also have a YouTube channel where they take a deeper dive into sort of the historical events that
I'll put the links
that inspired some of the songs, so we'll put a link onto that. And I just want to give a shout out to, so if anybody else is sort of interested in World War I or that sort of stuff, I mean, there's a tome of knowledge on World War I, movies, books, every sort of thing's been covered. But if you're listening to podcasts, give the Battles of the First World War podcast a listen. Mike Cunha. He's absolutely fantastic. He's an American fella, and he sort of does day-to-day, week-by-week from the beginning of the war. He sort of covers absolutely everything. So if you want a really, really deep dive...
I'll put the links in the show notes below so you can have a click on and see some of his stuff, because I know I'm going to do that this afternoon when I settle down to relax Yeah.
Because, he's been a great inspiration for me in my sort of recent love of First World War history.
Brilliant.
But other than that, it's been a pleasure, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, I really enjoy these sort of crossover kind of shows. It gets you to, takes us out of our normal mundane music world and gives us a little bit of knowledge as well. So thanks to guys again, and as always, stay safe.